Hello, welcome to Book Talk. I'm your host, Anthony Moirore. At Book Talk, we get to have an author come and tell us about his book or her book, and it's always an interesting story to hear it right from the author. And today, we have a great guest with us who is going to tell us about a promise made, a promise kept. And so I'm not going to keep you waiting. I'm going to bring right away our guest for today, who is none other than Frank DiMaio. Welcome to the show, Frank.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you on our show, and we are excited to hear about a promise made, a promise kept. And before we get started, we'd like to know who is Frank? Where is he from? And where is he right now?
Uh, Frank is living in Florida, the U.S., in Denellen, and that's my current home. I've lived in many places around the country and Canada as well for many years.
Hmm. And is that where you were born?
No, I was born in Providence, Rhode Island, the smallest state of the Union, in 1949. um, in a snowstorm, according to my mom. So, and that was brought up there. Things you move on after high school and college, and I decided to see the world. So, traveled to England and Ireland and parts of Canada after graduation.
Beautiful. And when I hear that name, Providence, it reminds me of this famous judge. I didn't even know that Providence is the smallest of the states.
Well, this is the capital. Rhode
Ah,
Island is the state, and
okay.
most people actually get that confused with Long Island, which
Yeah.
is part of New York. And they say, "Oh, you're from New York," and I say, "No, I'm from Rhode Island, the smallest state in the Union."
Okay. Um, your sound is a bit has gone a bit low. I don't know why. Do you have is the microphone an external one that you can adjust the position?
How's that? Is
Yeah,
that
it's improved. Thank
okay?
thank you very
It's
much. So we keep going. So
yes,
yes, you were explaining to us about the confusion that many people have of Rhode Island in Europe.
yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So and in your journeys, writing is one of the journeys. When did you start writing, or and I mean, how did the writing come into your path of life?
The writing aspect began in junior high school. Actually, the starting with a journal and writing bad poetry, that kind of expression. And then, of course, life gets in the way and you begin to move away from that. And I got involved in the sciences and eventually became a chiropractic physician. And the journaling came back to life and the writing came back to life after my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2000.
Mm,
And it became an extension of my art because I left chiropractic and became a sculptor and did photography. Uh, like my junior high school years, my drawings were somewhat primitive. However, I enjoyed doing them. But the writing aspect became much more part of me, especially when my wife was ill, because it was the method to which I was able to express the depth of the emotion and pain that I had from her loss. And
mm.
it eventually became the impetus for the book.
Oh, okay. So you lost your wife of how long? How long had you been married to her?
We were together since 1988, and she passed away in 2004.
Mm,
And excuse me, the story when I originally started it in 2005 was very much based on my journal,
mm-hmm,
in our journal, because we both started one at the same time after her diagnosis.
mm-hmm,
And after I had written it, I put it in what you would call, or what I call, deep storage. In other words, someplace I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to be reminded of it. I wasn't interested in pulling it out.
mm-hmm,
And at one point, someone I hadn't uh, seen in over 43 years, who I knew from chiropractic school, contacted me on LinkedIn because I had mentioned on my page that I was an author. And she cajoled me into sending her my manuscripts because at that particular time I had 6 stories that I had been working on and continue to do. One of them is also another one's nonfiction is completed and now going to become a series. But the main thing was that she read my first one and she said it made her sick for 3 days because of the intensity to which I had expressed myself from my journal.
mm-hmm,
However, she did say the last part, which was my sail to Bermuda to raise funds for breast cancer awareness, was uplifting, was reinforcing, gave her a feel good emotion.
mm-hmm,
So she presented her case, being a lawyer that she is, to write that aspect of the story as the book. I
mm-hmm,
just because I felt that I could be telling the story from the beginning when my wife and I met, how our relationship developed, the type of life we wove together, the tapestry that we created for one another, and the love that we had for sailing and being on the water was the impetus for me to make this journey and to make that sail as part of a promise to her.
mm-hmm.
But she said, no, don't do that. And I relinquished and I said, okay, fine. But I felt that at that particular point, I had done a disservice to the reader because the reader, even though the story was compelling and it was exciting, I was giving them the end result of a story that needed to be expressed and explained in its entirety, giving the proper reasoning behind to make the sale.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I made and rewrote and wrote A Promise Made, A Promise Kept.
Mm.
And part of that is including uh, the 5 things that a husband should embrace to heal from the loss of their spouse from breast cancer
Mm.
and to let them know that they are not alone, that someone out there understands their pain
Yeah.
and give them hope.
Mm. And that's good of you. coming out with your story and sharing it with us here, because there's always someone out there who's going through issues that we could have gone through and overcome, and they don't know how to go out of it. And our experience shared could be a light for them. It could be a lifeboat for them once we set it out there for them to have a look at it, to read it, and get the story behind it. So you did quite good in coming out, and I can only imagine, having lived with your wife for over 20 years. I mean, there's quite much you had shared together. It's quite much, and I believe that some of the experiences are shared in the book, since you decided to tell it from the beginning up to the end. And if I may ask, maybe, how did you meet with your wife in the first place?
That in itself is could be another book. Uh, I was at the time I was practicing chiropractic, and I was going through a divorce. And she happened to come in the office seeking care for an automobile accident. And I walked into the room, and I was suddenly overcome. I was, for lack of a better words, speechless in looking into her eyes, and the depth of warmth in her smile was overwhelming. Uh, I don't, I can't give you a specific instance within that 1.5 minute period of time where I was speechless. And she raised an eyebrow and looked at me and said, "Well, are you going to say something?" And to come at the time, I'm thinking to myself in my head, what a klutz. You should be speaking to this person.
Hmm.
And I blurted out, "Hi, I'm Dr. DiMaio. How can I help you today?" And so we went from there. I examined her, I treated her, and I released her. And she came back into the office almost a year later, seeking treatment for another particular problem. And at that particular point in time, the treatments followed through, and I was looking to do something else besides my practice. I wanted to give back. So I was looking to teach, and I was putting together my resume, and she came into the office. She was one of the last patients in the evening. So, what are you doing? I said, "I'm working on my resume because I want to do something to give back to the community and to teach." And she said, "Oh, I teach. How would you like to be a guest lecturer?" I looked at her and I said, "Excuse me, I thought you were an administrative assistant for Salve Regina University in Newport, Rhode Island." And she said, "Yes, but I teach paralegal classes at night. And it would be great if you could come in and give the insights about practice and communication and skills to my students."
Mm.
I said, "Okay." 2 weeks later, Anthony, my teaching career began. And that was how our relationship began. And a couple of years later, we started seeing each other on a more regular basis.
Mm. Now, we never know when and where or how we are going to meet with someone that is going to have a big impact in our own life. And that was quite an experience. And as you say, it could be a whole book that could could be
It
a whole.
was
It's
an
interesting.
amazing, it was an amazing journey.
Mhm.
And my journey continues, and it's because of her,
Mm.
her insight, her inspiration, her guidance, her gentleness, of being able to inspire me to continue not only with my education, but in my art.
Mm.
Uh, So my life is a tribute to her,
Uh,
as as is the book.
that's good. That's good. Is that, and if I may ask, where was the promise made, and what was the promise?
Okay, so we were at the time we were living in Richmond, Virginia, or an outskirts of Richmond, Virginia. And she was teaching, and I was an adjunct professor along with her at Bryant Stratton College.
Mhm.
When she was diagnosed, that was in 2000, and she was treated for her cancer at that particular time, started her treatment. When things got bad, closer to 2004, uh, we talked about wanting to give something back to the Massey Cancer Center in terms of those individuals who were going through the process of treatment. Being that we were in the process of restoring a beautiful little sailboat, a 1969 Choi Lee 31-foot offshore ketch that had been left to decay in the middle of a marina. We took it upon ourselves to restore it. And in that process of working on that, that was when her diagnosis moved from recovery, remission of her cancer to a metastases in her brain, the
Mm.
size of a kiwi fruit. So in that moment, we realized that her time and our time together is going to be limited. And we donated the boat back to an organization on the eastern shore of Virginia who sells boats, auctions them off, and uses the money to teach children and young adults about conservation of the Chesapeake Bay. When we talked about offering sailing to patients, that was one of the things that we wanted to do. And it moved from that with her legal background to tell me that really it's a wonderful idea, but liability wise, it wouldn't be a good thing because we're taking strangers onto a private vessel. She said, "You love to sail. You know that I like to cruise and I want to go to Bermuda." She'd been there in the past. She said, "But I don't like to cruise." I said, "I would want to be driving the cruise ship. I wouldn't want to be a passenger on the cruise ship." So she said, "Okay, so here's the deal. I'll fly to Bermuda. You sail to Bermuda. And then we'll sail around the island and everything will be hunky dory because you know me, I'm high maintenance," as she placed it. So that was how it began. And there were other aspects of her wishes that were involved. And but that was one of the promises that I made to her was that I would do a solo sail to Bermuda to raise funds for breast cancer awareness and to allow those funds to be used by the Massey Cancer Center in Richmond, Virginia.
Mm. That's, and you're keeping the promise. You kept it, and you're keeping the other promises that you would say could be incorporated or together inside in the story. And going back, uh, there is something that we could be curious about now since you became a family, or she became your wife, you became her husband. Did you ever have children?
We never had children together.
Mhm.
She had two children from a previous marriage. I had two children from my previous marriage. So together we had four children,
Mhm.
and they are all adults. And now I have three grandchildren,
Oh.
uh, and that is that is an energy requirement that needs copious amounts of coffee to be able to stay active with, because they just, I can see they just run me ragged. Josephina is my first grandchild,
Mhm.
first grandchild, and I just finished a vacation up in Rhode Island visiting with them, and to read stories and to keep up with her, I needed at least two pots of coffee a day because they're to just run you ragged. But
Mm.
she's a beautiful little girl, very inquisitive, and she if I might go back to that prior to the start of the show, I noticed that I have a goatee, and she grabbed it and she held on to it and gave it a good yank, and she says, "Papu," uh, which means grandfather in Greek, says, "You have a goatee, but you're not a goat." And I said, "No, honey, I'm not a goat, but you look like a goat." I said, "Yes, but I'm not a goat." And she laughs and giggles, and then she tickles me under the chin. So, but yeah, that's
Mm.
grandchildren. They're a wonderful thing. They're
Yeah, they are wonderful. In Greek, we say "nazison." May they live. I mean, it's a good wish. And because you are the one started talking about Papu in Greek, which is grandfather, please tell us what's your connection with Greek?
uh, my connection with Greece is through my mom. My mom is Greek, and my dad is Italian. So I am of Mediterranean blood, but being from that, I am considered, or I think of myself as a mongrel, just like a mutt, so to speak.
Mhm.
But it's an interesting combination. I mean, when you think about Greece and Italy and the history and the thousands of years of influence, my ancestral roots are obviously much deeper than just being Italian and Greek. But the Greek part is my mom and my papu and my yaya both came from Sparta, a village outside of Sparta, Greece,
Mhm.
actually called Daphne. And I have yet to be there. I have yet to visit the village of Filiarich, which is the village my father's parents came from,
Mhm.
uh, outside of Naples. But sooner or later, I'll get there. I'll have an opportunity to visit my ancestral roots.
And we wish you all the best. We wish that your dream may come true the soonest possible. Tell us the secret behind the goatee.
I'm
Where,
sorry.
what inspired the goatee?
Oh, why the goatee?
Yeah.
Um, I had a very large beard, and I I hadn't shaved it, trimmed it, or done anything with it for almost 2 years. So it was down to about here and came out about here. And I looked, it had banana curls in it. So it was like looking at Santa Claus. And again, but I trimmed it down. I took it off. But I thought this was an interesting addition. But it'll probably disappear in a little while. I'll be get tired of it, and it'll be gone, and I'll be clean shaven again. But I always do something with my face. I'd have handlebar mustache come out and be huge because it wouldn't require waxing. It just that's because of the banana curls. It just automatically grew in that shape.
Mm.
But I like it.
Yeah, wonderful. And it's not just a common thing that someone who's gone through a loss will be smiling all along and telling us interesting stories of Agoti. And we appreciate that fact from you that you can still afford a smile and you've taken your time and put in words down so that you tell your story of how this promise is being kept. And the subtitle of the book is called Five Things a Husband Should Embrace for Healing the Loss of a Spouse to Breast Cancer. I'm curious to know what are those five things that have enabled you to heal so that you can still afford a smile and put down a book and give back to the society.
Well, that's they are what I went through. These five things are what I learned about myself. Um, One is that you need the opportunity to grieve. You need the opportunity to understand a loss. And that loss could be not only for anyone, but it could be for anything. It could be the loss of a job, it could be the loss of a pet, a child, a husband, a wife, a mother, a grandfather. It doesn't matter. It's still going to impact you. It's a trauma that has a deep seated emotional impact. The other thing is that an individual needs to surrender. They need to give themselves up to someone else, to other people, a friend. And I say that a friend, not a bunch of friends, a friend or a family member or another individual who you may know who has experienced a similar loss. Because in that particular moment, you are connected and you have a spiritual connection as well as the emotional. So it provides you an opportunity to be free with your emotions, to be willing to share and not feel defensive, to not feel isolated. And that is a very freeing aspect when you're willing to surrender. The other is to lower your expectations. All right, now this is important because I didn't. Lowering your expectations means that you're giving yourself permission to set a standard of emotion, not expecting yourself to get over the loss, because the word get over just doesn't cut it. It doesn't belong because you never really get over anything. But when you can lower your expectations, whatever grief that you're feeling becomes not only manageable, but it does not define who you are. And that is incredibly important because it doesn't take away from who you really are, your core. We lose sight of who we are in the process of grief
Mhm.
because we are on the precipice of a rabbit hole in survivor's guilt. Now, we are so easily pushed not by anybody else, by ourselves, into that abyss. And that is where I went. Because somebody that goes through survivor's guilt, there is a period of time of recovery that, or improvement, that can be months, could be weeks, because has, everyone is a different person and we all have our own elements of personality.
Mhm.
For myself, it was complicated. And it became complicated because number one, I was writing the journal and I was writing the story. So I was visiting my pain on a daily basis.
Mhm.
And even though I may have been seeing improvements in how I was feeling, every time I picked up a pen, I was down the rabbit hole. So lowering expectations is a good thing. It doesn't define who you are. You have the opportunity to be who you are on your own terms. Number four is probably an interesting aspect to follow, and that is shame. You have to show shame the back door. You've got to kick it out. You can't blame yourself for what happened. You will, I promise you, you will, and you will be devastated by it. But there is a period of time when you begin to pull back from the expectations that you had set to the ability to show shame that it doesn't have any power over you. And it takes courage to deal with that element because, like many of us, growing up in a guilt environment, especially Greek, it's like a family thing. Guilt is a very powerful tool. And at the same time, when you're growing up with it, it's like having to do, as we say in the Catholicism, mea culpa. I have to, confess, and I have to be given blessing to continue to do what I need to do. But you need to show shame the back door, kick it out, and give
Mhm.
yourself the opportunity to feel stronger in your own time and place.
Mhm.
The fifth one is my favorite. The fifth one, and the most important, is to laugh.
Mhm.
Laugh often, laugh out loud, laugh riotously, laugh at yourself because you are the best target for your laughter. Because we all do things that we go, wish I had a V8, but in the same element, you need to have a sense of forgiveness in a way, especially when you're dealing with the intensity of grief.
Mhm.
But when you find those elements within yourself and the relationship that you had with your spouse that provided you the moments of riotous laughter, find them, embrace them, use them, because it will change your chemistry. Laughter changes your chemistry.
Mhm.
And there are books by authors such as Bernie Siegel. Another one here, Norman Cousins. And I mention them in the book, is that they used laughter to heal their illness. And it is that chemistry that I talk about briefly.
Mhm.
When it changes, you get when you laugh, you get energized. Your body becomes uplifted. And uplifting words do the same thing, just as the laughter does. And I make that a very important correlation because the words of negativity, the words of pain, grief, fear, fight or flight, anger, remorse, sorrow, sadness, they're all negative in their implication. They're not positive. They're not uplifting. They don't provide avenues of chemical transition in the body to affect the mind and the brain. And there's a whole reading list of books about the importance of words and vocabulary and how the brain functions with uplifting words. And we're not talking about positive reinforcement. We're not talking about positive affirmations. You could say that I am good, I am grateful, I am deserving, but those are all beginnings of uplifting words, which need to be placed in a sentence, needs to be placed into a paragraph of description of an individual's feelings. And that's where journaling comes in.
Mm.
That's where the importance of journaling falls. And that's what I used throughout the process of writing this book. From the time when it was terrible, it was vomitous, for lack of a better word to come to my mind at this particular point in time, but it was important. And that any individual having this difficulty of dealing with loss, when they start a journal, it may be difficult in the beginning. They may have a difficult time even picking up the pen like I did. But when I started journaling was in junior high school, and I began with doodling. And then, of course, moved on to terrible poetry, being a teenager. But when you do that, when you make that effort and you make that transition and to move from the negative impact of illness and loss to a positive impact of uplifting vocabulary that you use in a descriptive format, it changes your chemistry. It changes how you feel, how your brain functions, and your outlook. And those are the five major things. There are five others as well, but those are the five most important. And I make mention of the journaling as a method to be able to get through those and find a balance.
Mm. Thank you, thank you very much, Frank DiMaio. For those who may be joining us now, those who may have got to listen to this somewhere in the middle, we are covering the book A Promise Made, a Promise Kept by Frank DiMaio. And the subtitle is The Five Things Husbands Should Embrace for Healing the Loss of a Spouse to Breast Cancer. And those five major things are what Frank has just shared. And they are in the book. And much more stories are in the book. I want to believe so. And I am asking for someone who may be wondering, where can I get that book to read? How can they get it, Frank?
Well, currently it's in the publisher's hands for a cover. They can email me directly at fjd.writer. At gmail.com. Excuse me. And I will send it to them. There is a caveat. They're going to get the whole book. And I hope that they would share it with whatever network that they have. But I would request that after they read it, that they send me a review. to help me on writing other aspects. My second book, a companion to this, which is a psychology of healing, based on the journaling and the words and the chemistry affecting the brain. So I like feedback. So I want to give this book out, because if I can reach one person who feels lost as I did through the loss of a spouse, and they see something in my book that triggers them to say, I went through that. I understand what he's talking about. Then I've done my job, Anthony. And I'm hoping that there is someone out there that will feel that way. So in that instance, I'm giving the book away. So all of your listeners are welcome to email me and just simply request a copy, and I will send it to them. And I would hope that after they read it, they will send me a review. Now, once the book is released and published, it will also be free, but they will also get a cover for it. It'll be an ebook. And it'll be free probably for the first 2 days of release. But you're getting it now from your program. All of your listeners are going to have the opportunity to read my and Judith's story and to benefit from it and to share it. Because the more people that have an opportunity to read it, it's the more hearts that will be touched.
Wow, that's a true definition of giving back. Whoever is listening and those who will get to listen after we are through with this episode on the podcast platforms that this one is going to be uploaded on, reach out to Frank at fjd.writer@gmail.com and request for the book, A Promise Made, A Promise Kept. And he will send it to you absolutely free. Now, what a kind person, a kind heart. Thank you very much, Frank. We really appreciate you giving out and giving back. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony, for having me.
Yes, so we are almost through with the show, and this is Now Tell Us, which you can find at nowtellus.com. You subscribe to our channel and share all the episodes, and this one specifically. And we are almost coming to the end, but before we do, we always ask our guests to share with us a few words that we will always remember. This is your time, Frank.
I just lost you.
Oh, I said, share with us a few words that we will always remember. And I hope it's not, I just lost you.
Okay. Like when someone smiles at you, you smile back. It's the natural course of things, right? It's uplifting. It's one of those things like vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
Positive emotion. It's a positive reinforcing thing. And I'm looking at you smiling, and I can hear some of your words, but your smile is there, and then your words disappear. But your smile stays, which is fine, because that means that, whatever it is I missed, it had to have been good.
Okay. So there's words that we should always remember is smile at someone because you get it back. Now,
That's
Frank may be losing us at this point, but we are through anyway. We made it through. We did. And that's very good of you, Frank. And that's very good of you, listener, whether you're listening to us live from the many platforms that this video is available, or whether you get to listen to it after we are through. We really appreciate you taking your time. Reach out to Frank and get to read the book and send a review back, and he will appreciate that. So that's it for now, and I have been your host, Anthony Morore, and together with Frank, we are saying bye for now.
God
Bye.
bless.
God bless.